I actually have a question, if that's okay.
That is all right.
Have you ever seen an example of debriefing in video games? I was actually going to bring up Life is Strange because the closest that I've seen in as far as like debriefing goes, and it wasn't even built into the game, was that after difficult scenes they would have during the loading screen a little message like, if you're feeling suicidal, call this hotline. Or like if you're having trouble, call this number. Have you seen any kind of examples of debriefing in video games? And I would like to open this up to the room as well.
Thank you. Yes.
What was it?
Depression request. I was actually at a panel about this earlier today.
Did Transporter have one? Oh, I don't actually think so.
I think you did.
Did it?
Yeah, I think it might have had links to like learn more and support it.
Would you consider the beginner's guide? Or is
That's
that
when they could've
debriefing as much as just a conversation?
It's really too bad that because Davey was here
He was here
earlier,
earlier,
and I would have loved to have you put him on the spot. Because it was actually Magfest. We sat here most of a lot of last Magfest talking about this hotel room. I refuse to answer for him, but if you catch him, like bug him.
Great, where is it?
I know. If you catch him, he's kind of like rare Pokemon.
He's a shiner.
There was one other thing about debriefing that I'm trying to remember the name of. I actually, James recommended it at one point. Had a bunch of flies in it, and a very strange TV that you went into. Did anyone see this game? No, much more even than this. Like violently. Yes, that's the one. Do you remember the name of it?
I know it's very Christian.
Yes.
I remember the conversation about how basically their intent and our intent is stuff. So that was what I took that away from that.
Yeah, and it was really interesting because in that case, I felt like the debrief sort of failed and actually just damaged what I got from it. So it's just really interesting because again, it's that question of authorial intent, right? And when the author, I mean, that's one where the author actually literally comes out on video and explains to you what their intent was and what the point is. And I felt like it did a disservice to the player's ability to interpret the game, and as such, I mean, their message was a message I did not associate with and didn't get as much from, and so it was this really interesting moment where I was like, wow, in an interaction medium, how do you do a debrief in a successful way that doesn't take away from the player?
Right, because the debrief is supposed to be about validating the emotions of the person who is experiencing these events, and how can you possibly predict what kind of emotional reaction your player is going to have?
I'm of the view that it has to be done separately, apart, generally speaking, apart from the game mechanism. I actually feel that generally, like, you sit down with someone, like any meaningful experience in your life,
and so
sit down with someone, talk.
And so perhaps in order to have a truly good debrief after a video game, it needs to be multiplayer.
Well, I was wondering even if we just needed to have a space to have a conversation, because one of the things I've got a bunch of videos in the can that are test runs of a series that we may or may not do, but the idea is it's really like James recommends, but instead it will be about everything from books to games to music to whatever. But at the end I'm going to ask a question, and then the space for the comments is actually a space to have discussion for everybody who wishes we had a book club, right? We wishes we still had a place to really discuss these games. And I think that's one of the things we're lacking for a lot of games is that discussion space. More, yes, but more hopefully in the sense of book club. true of people sitting around the old BBS idea, right? But what's weird in a multiplayer environment is then you have to worry about all the toxic elements that we always have to deal with in multiplayer, right? And how you filter those out, because unfortunately, a very small minority can ruin, as in the case of debrief, an excellent debrief, right?
How do you do the same thing with YouTube comments for the upcoming show?
So I'm less worried there because I want it to be a discussion forum rather than necessarily a debrief for everyone. We don't have a really good answer. I mean, even in extra credits, YouTube filtering is getting better, but yeah. And there are on occasion comments that if they slip through the filter and we feel like they're racist or other things, we will take them off. But manually filtering, it's not practical, and by the time you catch something through manual filtering, it's already too late for those of you who are having an emotional experience with this. So I don't have a good answer, right? If I did, we could make the world a much better place much quicker.
The Sisters of the Amniotic Lens.
Yes, that's it, Sisters of the Amniotic Lens. So if you're looking for a game with a debrief, check that out, but it's a very interesting manifestation of the debrief. Yeah. It is also, as I said, stridently indie to the point at which you can argue it is unplayable. But I don't actually mean to slam on it, right? Like it was interesting enough. It's actually an interesting product. Like it's worth, if you're interested in the medium of game, if you're interested in all the things game could do or the way that this medium can be shaped, it's worth looking at. You've just been warned.
Yeah, game equivalent to the student film.
It's more the game equivalent of your like hardest core Eastern European independent film during the height of the Soviet Union. Right?
Is that Seven Seal?
No, more like God, what is his name? The guy who did Stalker. What's the guy? The filmmaker who did Stalker. Anyway, some of his stuff where it's just like, I mean, like Kurosawa's Dreams put through a like Soviet brutalist lens, right? That's the sort of thing that we're talking about here. So, your turn to call somebody. This is weird. Should you call people?
Back row, farthest person with hand up on that side. That's you.
Okay. In regards to like the book club, I'm a member of the Something Awful forums, and their Let's Play subforum, I find it's like a good, closest analog I can think of a book club, because it'd just be somebody playing a game, but along the way, other people would play, they discuss like ideas of the game, like the strategy, the meaning and philosophy. There's actually an ongoing thread about art games, and unlike YouTube comments, there's actually like discussion and not so many memes and cursing at each other. So that's something to consider. Their main method of, avoiding trolls is strong moderation and a paywall. So I don't know how that would work for your series, but
There's also a separate issue between active trolling and behavior that causes people to opt out.
Yeah.
Because I don't have to use a meme. I don't have to be openly pejorative. But there are still ways of presenting my ideas that are so not argumentative, so aggressive in trying to say, no, this is how it is. That even if someone has reasons, good, logical, rational reasons to disagree, might just decide it's not worth the effort to convince the person on the other end, because you are exposing yourself to the rest of the audience for comparison, and that can be an investment level threshold that someone is not prepared to do ever, or right now, or for this medium, or whatnot, which is not strictly a moderation issue. it's a social culture issue.
Well, but that's why it's so important, right? Because we live in modern democracies where we have lost the skill to dialogue.
Or the desire.
I think it's both, right? But it is, I mean, it is a skill, and in some ways it atrophies in not use. And so I think it's really important that we do these things so we start thinking that back, because you're right. I mean, a lot of times the internet is a very aggressive place, and as the best form that has ever existed for the communication of ideas, we need to make sure it is a safe space for those ideas to be communicated.
And so the traditional structure of moderation of rules is a start. But I'm of the view, this is like segueing off of either, that what is better, or at least more comprehensive, is a separate statement of principles that everyone should try to aspire towards, which are not to be interpreted as rules.
Well, it's interesting because what you bring up is the thing that I think is happening and I think will continue to happen, which is the adoption of a social contract for the internet, right? And in some ways I think it's inevitable, right? Because every time that we as a species have gathered together in groups, we come to a social contract, and it may take a little while, but it actually doesn't take us that long, and I think we're at that point in the internet.
Right? At some point it stops being fashionable to be aggressive or argumentative or rude, and that's separate and aside from being banned for it. It's just push, and when your friends find out that you were the one who said things a certain way and caused someone else to drop out, they'll be like, that just wasn't cool, right? And when we get there, the quality of dialogue is going to be so much better. It's so amazing. But it's going to take a lot of effort to move because that's re-educating ourselves as individuals, not as a collective. And that's hard to do because then you have to look at yourself in the mirror and go, man, I shouldn't do that.
Well, you have to imagine that these people do these immoral things, like, well, not immortal. They're not immoral. Immoral, sorry.
Close enough. Close enough.
Just like James, like, it's
As soon as the later it gets.
Yeah, but they do these immoral things, because to them it's just words on a screen, and it doesn't matter. It's like, how is this going to affect my life? The thing to think about is how is this going to affect the life of somebody else?
I want to draw. I don't disagree. There are lots of times when people do things where if they had full knowledge of the consequences of what they were doing and affecting other people, they wouldn't do it. But I'm looking a step beyond even that. There are times where you're not actually doing something that's necessarily immoral, but you could still be more respectful, more welcoming, and more opening. And by you, I mean us.
Well, and there are times at which there's a way to establish a moral code that doesn't require, that it's irrelevant of its actual practical effect on another person. Like, you can say certain things are wrong, right? And in doing so, if we come to that point, and we have a whole comment about relativism and talking about who gets to set those things, but if we come to a point, at least individually, where we can say to ourselves, I don't mind, like, it doesn't matter if this person on the other side of the line has thick skin, I'm still not going to do this because it would be wrong whether or not they can take it, right? And so, it's an interesting thing to come to, but I want to make sure we get to a lot more questions, and you haven't gotten a call on any yet, so it's your turn.
I'm just fascinated by the questions in the dialogue down here, so pardon me, sorry,
Welcome to James.
Yeah. James and then mini James down here.
Hi, Mini James, hello.
All right, let's see. Oh, you've got a red ball cap and blue and yellow stripes, and I can see you all the way from here. Yeah.
So, excuse me if this has been already covered in an episode, but I wanted to ask about a concept that's been kind of on my mind lately about game design. We were talking about comics earlier, and I guess a good way to attack the issue is, you know how they have gutters in comics?
Yeah.
I'm wondering if there's a term for that in games, like space for the player to fill in, because transitioning from Fallout 3 to Fallout 4, something about Fallout 4 kind of bothers me, in that my character had a voice in this game, where in Fallout 3, I kind of filled in with my head everything about my character. And I felt a lot more attached to my character in Fallout 3. I felt like more like they were me. And so I'm wondering if there's maybe a term I don't know, or this concept. I don't know if it has a name.
So, sort of, right? Like those type of characters, the blank slate character is usually just called that, right? The blank slate character, or the empty vessel is very often what we call it, because for a character like your character in Fallout, right, you fill that character. What's fascinating to me is that disjunct that you experience between the two, because I had the exact same experience, and I think that's, I think it's actually relatively common. And is there an overarching term, though, for the things that you fill in the game? I don't think we have one, and you're right, we really should, because there's a lot of things like that we do that we still rely on the player's imagination, right? We've been worse and worse about relying on player imagination in the past half-decade or so, but there's still a lot, and those moments are really important. What you understand about your character that you have filled in your head is as important as anything the designers put down there, right, to give you the space to fill in that character. That's a really interesting question. No, I may actually write something about that just to try and come up with terminology so we all have it. That's actually a really good question.
Maybe you can name it. Maybe you can name it.
Maybe player space, I guess. Just because it's the space, instead of gutter space, it's like, it's the space for the player to fill in.
I do like equating gutter space and player space. But no, player space, I'd have to think if we use anything that, use that for anything else.
I don't suppose the magic circle kind of could encompass this, or is that more in terms of actual play?
The magic circle is more the acceptance, right? The acceptance of unreality. It's the same, I mean, you walk into a magic circle when you walk into a church or a concert or a video game, because it's sitting around the fire. It's this moment where you are coming to accept that we are now within the rules of a different reality. And so it's not the things you fill in with that reality, but rather entering the magic circle is, I will accept rules that are not the traditional rules of my everyday life.
Does that not be negative possibility space?
No, negative possibility space is when expectations are unfulfilled, right? So like if you play a game and there's treasure on some of the mountains, and then you climb up this really big, really hard to get up mountain, and you get to the top, and there's no treasure, and there's nothing, and it's just a blank gray rock, and you're just like,
Easter eggs here, sorry.
Well, actually, you saw the Grand Theft Auto one, right?
Yes.
Yeah, so that is them filling in the negative possibility space with exactly that.
Excuse me?
Yeah.
I'm actually a comic artist. The thing is that when you remove gutters, that's what's called a bleed effect. So it's pretty much where you actually have you create a space that allows the person reading it to immerse themselves completely. So it's usually used for panel shots. So what I was going to recommend is, I like the idea of player space, but when you talk about a gutter, you're talking about a break.
Yeah.
So it's almost like I think the terminology should be used as you have that beat, you have that moment of like, I would almost call it a player beat. Like it's a moment for the player to stop and have that little bit of a moment. And when you don't have that, you have full bleed, where you get so much information that you kind of have to wander around in it for a little bit.
Well, maybe a gutter wasn't the best example. What I was thinking of was like stuff that you find in like a text-based game, something like, or Undertale, or When I'm Dressed as Earthbound would be a good example, because there's a lot of moments where there's just text descriptions of what the character does. And like that's pretty much all of Earthbound's gameplay is just a static sprite and then descriptions of what your characters are doing. But then you have an amazing amount of there's an amazing amount of like imagination where you can imagine the characters that are walking around in the overworld doing all these amazing activities, like shooting fireworks.
Well, even like when we talk about Final Fantasy VII, right? You go look back at that blocky world, with it, and we have to fill it in with all that imagination space. So it is something that I'll definitely think about. But I know you had to take off.
Yeah, I gotta go.
But you are welcome up here anytime, sir.
Thank you. Thank you, guys.
So I believe there's one person at this table who hasn't called on anybody yet.
Is it Mini James over there?
No. You'll get your chance next.
She never introduced herself.
Did you never introduce yourself? You're not on the stage.
My name is Ray. Hello. I'm going to pick the person in the very, very back who is in a jacket. Yeah, you're pointing to yourself.
So my question kind of had to do with during the previous panel that...
Can you shout?
I'll try and shout. During the previous panel that James was in earlier, when they were talking about the consideration of game design, and I had a thought, and I was just kind of curious as to kind of everybody's thoughts on the idea of games as being analogous to like art installation. Like I had a professor at the school that I've been going to for a bunch of years that he was an art professor, and he took us into our art gallery, and he had an installation on there where it was literally just a book that was sitting on a table and a glove, and he invited us to go put on the glove and look through this book that he made about Soviet history, and that was creating a space for somebody to have an experience about a particular, present ideas, but it was about them exploring that freely, without any guidance. And I was thinking that games are more analogous to that type of, you're creating a space and you're creating an environment for someone to come in, they have their own agency to do, depending, obviously, to kind of explore that idea and do kind of whatever they want. If you set up a whole room that you have all these objects in it, someone could go to another one of the objects, check them out, or they could stand in the corner, for 2 hours and just look at this one particular thing and be captivated by this one thing. And you can't do anything about it. But that's the nature of installation. And I was curious as to presenting games as an installation as opposed to like the same way you would present a painting, like a thing. The way you present a film, it's kind of a thing you receive, where it's art installation and games or something that you kind of sit in. And the validity of using that actually to educate people about concepts. Like you were talking about education, and it got me thinking about this question for a long time, so I'm sorry.
No, it's really good. And never apologize for a question. I think that it's fantastic. So I think it's a really good way of conceptualizing them, actually. I think that we do have more akin to an installation piece than an image of a great piece of art that on the internet, right? I think that's a really good way of conceptualizing it.
As someone who really enjoys installation art, I would like to see more games that are in the same vein as that.
Eric Zimmerman, didn't he do a display at one point that was essentially like an installation piece that was also one of the games he did?
So there's actually a ton of them. There's actually, the further you get down into diving into indie weirdness, there are actually a lot of installation games that are awesome, fantastic art pieces that, if you're ever in New York, there's a place called Baby Castle. Awesome, good for you. We have the two people I would expect actually to be shouting.
I work there.
Really?
Yeah, I do.
It's awesome. I will try and pass by whenever I'm in New York, but it's so rare that I can make it to it. And then you have interactive pieces like, since we're talking about New York, Sleep No More, which, while not a game, is a very interesting interactive experience. And we're starting to blur those lines. If you ever get out to San Francisco, Wild Rumpus does a bunch of installation pieces that are, that again, are testing. And then we have things like Train, right? Because for those of you who don't know, Brendan Romero made a game that there's only one copy of in the world. And it's a board game, and it's called Train. And players gather around, and they're told the rules are to get as many little figures on their train car as they can by the time it gets to the last station. And as it's going, people will start piling the people on, laying them down, and stacking them one on top of another. And then the last card flips, and it's Auschwitz, right? And if you look carefully at the installation piece, right, and people just step back, people, because they realize that they've done this, right? Because they were just following the rules to the game without thinking about the rules. Right, but it's great because it has that moment where you have to realize it for yourself, right? Oh, it's a hammer blow.
Thanks for reading it for us.
Right, anytime. Right.
Did you guys know she actually wrote the rules for the games like using like an authentic Nazi typewriter?
Well, no, it's actually part of the table that the game is sort of installed on. And if you're actually looking closely, you can see that also we're complete with the swastika on the keypad. And so, if you're really looking, if you're really paying attention, you can even have the clues there. And when the game ends, you realize that you just obeyed rules because they were rules, and you didn't even look close enough to see what was right there in front of you, right?
Is there an option to not obey the rules?
Of course. I mean, like any game, right? Right, exactly. And like any game, you don't necessarily have to follow the rules. There's no reason why you have to put these people on there. You're doing it arbitrarily because they are rules. And someone has told you it's good to follow these rules, and that following them is better than not following them, right? Which is basically how games work.
The secret is you can always not follow the rules. That is always an option.
So is the moral, all games are not?
I like to think of myself as a dictatorial designer, yes. No, I think that it's this question of how much do they make you think about your rule system that they're operating within, right? Spec Ops is a great example of a game that the entire time it is asking you to examine the rules and examine what you're doing. And anything within a defined space, I mean, you can argue that we exist within the rules of physics, right? That we still exist within a rule space, but depending on how much you examine them, you can determine, are these rules leading to a bad place, or are these rules actually beneficial for me? And in most games, they're beneficial for me because they do no harm and bring me joy in some ways, or at least engagement, or teach me something about myself. But it's that ability to assess the rules and decide whether or not it's positive to follow them that makes it a fascist game or not.
He's my brother. I said.
Welcome.
Has anybody noticed that haunted houses seem to be changing their rules as far as interactivity goes?
Say that again?
The idea that haunted houses are also changing the rules to reflect more interactivity. I was at the East State Penitentiary.
Oh.
Yes. You have the, which is an old Panopticon modeled, the guard towers in the center, right? I think 6 or 7 hallways. And you have the option to, when you enter this haunted experience they do in October, to choose how much contact that you want, right? You're not allowed to, I mean, there are rules there, but now you have the option more these days to break those rules. You can give the staff permission to break them, and they will grab you and separate you from the people. There is, along the same lines in, I think, California, there is close your ears, middle schooler, there is a haunted house that has been put on by a porn company, I believe. You have to sign a waiver before you go in because of the content, right? It's not suitable for anybody under the age of 18. And some folks get in about 2 minutes in and they leave because they're so very disturbed. It's a spectacle, right? And you can choose how much interaction you want with the players there and characters there. But you got me thinking about spaces that make us extremely uncomfortable, that don't have the debriefing there at all, and then what we do with those things when we're done.
Did you see the static calls my name?
Oh, God. I did not, but talk about it.
I saw it.
Right.
Yeah.
Has anyone other than this fellow seen the static calls my name? No, it's a game. You should not play it.
Here's the recommendation: watch somebody else play it. There've been like 5 or 6 high-profile Let's Players who've done it.
No
Markiplier.
Or play it yourself, and it'll only take you 5 minutes, and just decide that you want to feel terrible.
Right.
Here's a better option. Don't play it.
No, it's 5 minutes, so we'll run down. It will literally be. But it's one of these things that it's one of the most uncomfortable experiences that you've probably gotten into in a game, and with just no debrief at all. right? And I think it's a very interesting example. I think you'd be curious about it, and 5 minutes of your life, trust me, check out.
But is it going to be with you for more than 5 minutes of your life?
Should you watch it during the day?
Yes, I mean, I don't mind having the horror seared on my brain.
Okay, but is it horror is what I'm trying to ask.
Well, the question is how you define horror.
That's all I need.
So it's not jump scares, not jump scares at all.
I'm trying to ask it more like psychological.
Yes.
Then I'm in.
So it's just disturbing.
But think about it this way.
So what's disturbing?
It's 5 minutes.
So you ever play Call of Cthulhu?
Sure.
You know how your character has sanity points?
Yes.
You will have less afterwards.
Will you have
Well, of course you will have more because you always trade sanity for mythos. But no, it's just it is one of these experiences that just puts us in a very uncomfortable place and that has no explanation. And I actually found it valuable, but I'm curious to see. I would love to hear your read on it at some point because
It's Static Speaks my name.
Static calls my name? Maybe Static speaks my name. It's one of those two. Yeah, Static speaks my name. You're probably right. If you just looked it up, you were sure.
Yeah, that's why I was trying to correct you by not correcting you.
Ah, excellent. Then yes, Static speaks my name. I told you, late at night, the later it gets, the less proper now. So don't trust any of my things. Just look up the names. But yeah, it's this really curious question of things that disturb us, how much of a debrief they need, and how you do that debrief.
After what happened, and it shows you 3 other pieces of stat.
Right, and then that was DJ, has anyone here played Lisa? I was just curious because there is there's also a game that thoroughly deserves its M rating, but is they're not enough of us have played it to really talk about it, but that I feel like succeeds in some ways at being mature in its dealing with very mature themes, except is again horribly disturbing.
It's mature in the same way that like absurdity, but like a postmodern, I guess, like shock value absurdity is. You know, like a Gravity Rainbow or something. You're like awful stuff, but absurd stuff too.
Well, and the difference between pure shock value and something like Gravity's Rainbow is even those moments, there's a point to it, right? There's something to gain out of it. And I felt like that's what they sort of achieved in that we very often don't achieve in just our random shock value games.
Yeah.
But sorry, I didn't mean to, I've totally derailed this. So what were you saying about said haunted house and lack of debrief? Although that, I'm not going to make the pun around that particular sentence, lack of debrief. So anyway, go right ahead.
There are lots of videos of that room.
Anyway, tangenting away from the weeds that I got us into.
No, thanks. It was basically that I was intrigued by the idea of the installation game that you can't get away from, and you mentioned Sleep No More, which is, if you haven't heard of it, it's in interactive. It's Macbeth inside the house, right? And you wear a mask. Your agency is very limited. When you go in, I think it's $100 a ticket. But we have these experiences that seem more game-like or that are interactive, where you have the ability to have some agency, and then sometimes it's taken away from you, and therein lies the game. So.
And I love those moments where they play around with giving you agency and then taking it away.
Yes.
Right.
Yes. Also, too. I am inspired. Yeah. So it's also a version, right? Because we've been talking about versions of things and media being porous. We've got graphic novels and movies and comics, and these other things that we are beginning to see share an awful lot in common. And we can also talk about the interactive experiences being something that has versions of it when we try to judge a newer version up against, say, the older one that we're more familiar with. But I think that's part of what makes it fun to encounter again, right? It's like the new take on something. But I think this is where he gets to choose.
He does.
Yes.
It's your turn to choose.
Choose wisely.
Ask the next question.
Can I make a question, Michael? Can it be a question specifically for him?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. So only raise your hand if you have a question for this fellow, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I get to call it anything.
No, boy. Eeny, meeny, miny,
Blue shirt, I believe.
Challenger approaching.
Me?
Yes.
Oh, there we go.
Okay. Well, my biggest question for you is: do you feel as though, having not been in middle school for a fair amount of time, do you feel as though it's of course not. Do you feel as though that games pander too much to you under the impression that you are still a kid? Or do you think they pander to you too much thinking you are an adult? And which do you personally prefer?
That is a very, very, very layered question.
Let's simplify it.
But you already asked it, so I'm going to dig right into it.
All right, go for it.
So, it's the best way to describe it is half and half. Half of the games they make for middle schoolers treat them too young, and the other half treat them like they're 65-year-olds who've been in World War II.
Then, as a middle schooler, how would you like the approach in a game?
And do you have any good examples?
Yeah, do you have any good examples of a game that you've approached? So, like, yeah, they're treating me like, I'm not necessarily like I'm an adult, but I have responsibility. Like I have agency.
This is definitely going to be something that a lot of people at this panel would definitely love. But believe it or not, Undertale is actually another great example. Because how it works is that, and I have a very weird friend group at school, and I hear them talk about Undertale a lot. And yes, that was a stab at them.
Good group of friends. Yeah.
Yeah. I wouldn't call them good.
No chill at all.
Alright, but how Undertale works is that it begins off and it's like, alright, this game looks very cartoony. It looks like...
Spoilers.
Alright, if you want to ask, I'm going to go into some spoilers.
Please no.
So if you want to ask
them... No, just go ahead. Try to speak as gently as possible. I'm
going to go into at least the demo part because that part is...
Hold on. Can you explain what is personally relevant to you about the game? That way you can talk about it. That way you can talk about like what's impacted you, what's resonated with you, without necessarily giving away spoilers, and spending a lot of time giving all of the context of the game.
Well, the most impactful thing are just loads and loads of spoilers. So, I'll just talk about the first beginning part. In the first beginning part, I went to Undertale blind, and a lot of really funny stuff happened because of that.
But now none of you will be able to. Right.
Well, no, half the audience.
I'm only going to talk about the first demo part.
The demo, okay.
So how it works is that in the very beginning, I knew that this game was different just because of the wall of information that already had been like poured onto me brick by brick. Not like spoilers, more just like, wow, this game is so good. So how it worked is I first went into it and I go on with my very own opinions and like I'd like to see for myself. I went into it and I thought, all right, this game has wacky dialogue. I like the dialogue, but it's it's kind of slow. I don't like that as much. The RPG system with sparing people is interesting, but honestly, the first enemy examples aren't really that good of examples of how deep and how interesting it can get. Because Frogget and Whisper are both very flat characters.
It's deceptively like.
Yeah. However, once I got to, and this is where more of the spoilers come in. Once I got, and once again, this is all in the demo. This isn't like playing the first. If you really wanted to stretch it out, 20 minutes of the game. You meet up with Toriel, which is basically, as the internet calls her, Goat Mama. Yeah, my grammar just is so you meet up with her, and at first I think like, oh, this is the basic mother's always supporting you, kind of like in Earthbound. And then like it went more and more deeper, and I saw more and more like 3D like round character from Toriel, and it just got so much more interesting. And then at the very end, I'm still not going to spoil a lot. And then at the very end, you have to leave Toriel, and she's super angry at you, and just that beginning part, like either choosing to spare her or kill her, perfectly set up the right audience. You want an audience that you can treat with respect. They're not little kids anymore. They're not like blah 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 blah. However, the best audience is, you don't want an audience that's just like complete and utter as, oh, Call of Duty is better. You don't want that kind of audience. You want to aim for an audience that tries to look at respect and looks at things that are darker, however, isn't always dark and has those lighter moments.
Right. All right. I guess it's my turn to all the way in the back over there. Yep.
Oh, I was just wondering, you were talking a lot about games that put you in uncomfortable situations, and games where they'll only have one chance. Have you ever played One Shot?
Which one is One Shot?
It's all one word. It's a short game that was made for like the RPG Maker contest.